The Gnostics were the founders of the great mystery schools of antiquity.
And those were not Illuminati fronts, were they?
Absolutely not. And there's a whole nother area, and perhaps we could have an interview just to concentrate on the beautiful topic of what the mysteries actually were. So the Gnostics were the founders of the mysteries, and you can think of them as people who were dedicated to the education and the true eugenics of the human races. And they also were seers. They were shamans of a sort.
Right.
And they could not only, they were not only educators. For instance, they taught literacy. They spread literacy in the ancient world. They founded the institutions of learning, such as the Great School of Alexandria. But they were also able, they had what you call genuinely paranormal abilities, but
Yes.
they were trained paranormal abilities. So they could look into the background of things, and they detected this figure of Melchizedek, and they detected that it was not human. They detected that it was a projection, like you could say, a virtual reality projection into the atmosphere of the earth by an extraterrestrial force. Okay?
Okay.
I know this is getting into science fiction, but hold on, because we're in a science fiction nightmare today. I think many people would agree on that, right? So the Gnostics determined by their paranormal faculties, and I'm talking about centuries of trained investigation in their movement. When one generation would learn things, they would pass it on to the next generation. They would learn more. They would investigate it more deeply. They would refine the knowledge. They exposed that the Father God, Yahweh, of the ancient Hebrews was actually an off-planet alien. And they exposed that Melchizedek was the emissary of this alien. So there is a real science fiction scenario event that happened that kicked this whole thing off. What happened historically, and this again is verifiable, there's ample evidence of this. The teachers of the mystery school, who didn't call themselves Gnostics, by the way, they call themselves teleste, meaning we who are guided, we who have a name, we who know the purpose, we who know ultimate things, divine matters. They were very private. And although the names of about 70 of them come down to us, we don't really have biographies of them because they prefer to be anonymous. However, something happened that caused them great alarm. They saw and they tracked the rise of this Zadokim cult, and they were very concerned about it for a number of centuries. And then something really catastrophic happened, that the Zadokim cult, which up until then had been an in-group unique to the Hebrews, exploded pandemically, and that is exactly the word. It exploded into a new religion, and it was endemic to the Hebrews, and it went pandemic in Christianity. And at the moment that happened, the Gnostic teachers living at that time, the century before BC, and then the 3 centuries afterwards, said, this is going to be a disaster. So we have to come out of our sanctuaries, we have to come out in public, and we have to argue with the ideologues who are propounding and propagating this deceitful, evil narrative. And so they came out, and one of the things they said was, in your face, your God, the one who called God, is not the true God, is not the creator of the earth, of humanity. It is a demented alien entity. How do you think the early Christian ideologues and fanatics and converts reacted to that statement?
About the same way they still do, John.
Sadly, about the same way they still do. They were so upset, they were so terrified that they turned on the Gnostics and the teachers of the mystery school, and they massacred them.
Yes.
And destroyed countless numbers of their writings, They destroyed their sanctuaries. I describe all this in the first six chapters of my book, particularly beginning with chapter 1, the murder of Hypatia. She was a very famous Gnostic, historically known, and in 415, in March of 415 in Alexandria, she was murdered in the street by a Christian mob, and she wasn't the only one. They murdered them. They drove them into exile. They would not allow the coexistence of that other message with the Christian message. They wouldn't allow it. If they had allowed it, there would be no Christianity in the world today. As I was reflecting on our interview, I reminded myself, look, I don't just want to say that the Gnostics warned us. So they predicted in a way. They didn't really predict, but they saw the program and they saw the whole operation. So in a way they did predict. I don't just want to tell people, well, the Gnostics saw this centuries ago and they predicted it. So what? That's not enough. What can we do now that we know about their warning? So I'd like to concentrate on that. But before I do so, let me cite St. Paul. I love to cite the Bible. Now, you talked about the ET alien element in the New Testament. Well, some people have said, many people have said, that Paul's experience at Damascus.
Oh, yes.
The encounter. Have you come across that?
Absolutely. I've actually written on that.
Well, then you are very close to the Gnostic interpretation. You see, Paul was a bounty hunter, and he was hired by the Romans to go and hunt down these Zaddikim, because the Zaddikim cult was not only a secret denomination of Judaism, but it was also a revolutionary group. It was an insurrection group who had a political agenda to overthrow the Roman Empire. And so the Romans were very savvy about that. They had spies, they had intel, they knew exactly what these Zaddikim were up to. So they hired Paul as a bounty hunter, and there were there were many cells of the Zaddikim in the area of now Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Israel. But the two principal ones were at the Dead Sea and in Damascus. So they sent him off to Damascus as a bounty hunter. He was going to get paid for finding the Zaddikim sect and exposing it to the Romans so that they could exterminate it. But what happened, according to my interpretation, was that he was recruited into that sect. He's like an FBI agent who went to break a drug gang, a drug cartel, and he got recruited into the cartel. That's my interpretation. However,
Absolutely.
To get to the final passage, and then we can go to the good news and how this all can change the world today. It might appear, and it certainly does appear, that what I've said about Melchizedek and that how it is an alien entity is very weird, and how Melchizedek was an extraterrestrial projection is very weird. But Paul himself says that. He does. There is a passage, I think it's in Romans, when he says, Christ, Christ this, Christ that, the Savior, the Messiah. Yeah, that's all a very big deal, but there is a power behind Christ. There's a power higher than Christ. And he names that power, Melchizedek. And he describes that power. And he says, it is without generation. It has neither father nor mother. It is a clone type entity. It is non-human and extra. He says that himself. Now, bear in mind that the word Christ is from a Greek verb, Christein, which means to anoint. So Christ is not a name like Tom, Dick, or Harry. It's a title. So Jesus Christ means Jesus the Anointed.
Yep.
But the question is, who is the anointer? Well, obviously, if I'm going to anoint you into my religion, and then you become the anointed reverend preacher, I, as the one who anoints you, actually have more power than you, don't I?
You do. And by the way, that's Hebrews 7:3, the verse you're referencing.
It's in Hebrews, right? Yeah, Melchizedek, without generation, having neither father nor mother. What are we talking about? We're talking about what the transhumanist fiends want to achieve today.
And John, even in the Greek, it goes beyond, not only without father or mother, but without any genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life.
What is that? What is that? That's an android. That's a clone. You know, I don't convert. I don't evangelize. I know sometimes I might sound a little like I do. You're just hearing my passion and my enthusiasm. I assure you, on moral grounds, with a moral certainty, I don't want to convert or recruit anyone. I just want to put out the truth for you to look at it. And I welcome anyone who wants to become a heretic. As I say, in Not in His Image, it comes from the Greek verb, which means to choose. Christianity is embraced by millions of people and chosen by almost no one.
Powerful.
You have the opportunity to choose your belief system, and you have the opportunity, and here's where we get to the good news. You have the opportunity to experience another myth of creation that stands in direct opposition to the Judeo-Christian narrative. That is what you find in the myth of the goddess Sophia, the wisdom goddess. So how can Gnostic knowledge, I call it Gnostic intel, and the narrative, the sacred narrative, change things today? Well, it doesn't change by recruiting or evangelizing anyone into a religion. I've said before that Gnosis is not an alternative religion. It is the alternative to all religions. It's a way to really know. You know God directly because you perceive her. The goddess that has produced the human race, that supports us with every breath, is here. It is present. The Gnostic myth teaches that the earth was never actually created in the commonly understood sense, like a potter creates a pot. It is in the process of being created all the time. And the trope, the best trope I have found to use for that is to use the trope of dreaming. The earth is being dreamed. You are in a living dream. And the question is, who is the dreamer? So the Gnostic myth teaches that the Aeon Sophia, a goddess from the core of our galaxy, turned into this earth. Her presence, the presence of the earth, is the divine presence. And the path of Gnosis within the frame of this narrative shows you how to go into that experience endlessly. It's an endless journey in discovery, delight, beauty. It's all about beauty and freedom. And the one thing that it excludes, I'm glad this is coming up because I have this in my notes. The one thing that it excludes, absolutely, is the victim syndrome. If you look psychologically, if you look as a pathologist at the foundations of Judaism and Christianity, you see that the whole enchilada rides on the victim syndrome. It's all about victimization. And again, fast forward to the present and ask yourself this question. Gee whiz, how come we hear that there is one race of people in the world, one ethnic group who has been more persecuted and victimized than any other in the world, whose suffering is superior to any other people's, and wait for it, yeah, but it seems like those people are running the world. It seems like when you look into finance, education, the media, surveillance, IT, ET, the Great Reset, they're running the world, and yet they're the biggest victims in the world. Now, hold on for a minute. Victimization is what you get out of when you break the malware. That's when you really know that you're deleting the corrupt files. I have to say that I wrote Not in His Image in 18 months, and I was in a state of white hot anger continually during that time. But I wanted to turn my anger like a sword into a weapon of truth. So I attempted to say things in the clearest way that I could. And to my mind, this is 2 sentences in Not in His Image, of which I am very, very proud. The divine victim mirrors to humanity not the solution of our suffering and a way to overcome it, but our total consuming enslavement to it. The victim syndrome works because it makes the force of suffering look stronger than the life force itself. So we got to get out of suffering. You know, one thing to get into the current crime against humanity and how we can overcome it, I'm sure that it's dawned on many people by now that these measures to prevent the spread of the coronavirus appear to be punitive. Did you ever feel like you're being punished? For your own safety, to save your own lives and save the lives of others, you do these things, and if you do these things, it's like, wow, I feel like I'm being punished. I have to wear a muzzle. I can't touch other people. I can't travel. I can't dance. I can't sing because singing propagates the virus. You know, we could go on for 15 minutes. It is the punitive rage of the insane, demented alien God that is now operating through this coronavirus scam. And it is a scam. It's a psyop. And it's the end game. I want to make it clear that I don't want to claim exclusive privilege. I know that there are many sincere human beings who are doing their best to expose it and overcome it. And I'm right with them. I support them. But I do maintain that there is a special force and a special power in the Gnostic Sophianic message to enable us to overcome it. There's a really big issue that comes up when you get into depth in the Gnostic message. And that issue is also a horrific issue tormenting and destroying the world today, which is the issue of a race. Now, go back to the basic code in the malware that I described. The narrative, as written by the authors, already makes a racial decision. The authors themselves belong to a superior race. Some Yehudans have even said they are a different species. So there are 2 races. There is the race of the in-group who brought Judeo-Christianity, and then there are all of the out-group. And what is the out-group? All other races. Okay, that is a radical division of races inherently embedded in the narrative. Now you come forward today and look at what is being used as a weapon to divide and conquer us.
Wow.
The issue of race. Now, the Sophianic Sophianic message liberates you from that racial problem, and it immunizes you. It immunizes you, if I might even use that cursed word, against racism, because the Sophianic myth says we are all children of the Great Mother, the Mother Earth, which is obvious, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And so the problem is not with the races, with a division among the races. It's a problem of a race that designates itself at the God level who is against all the other races. So they are creating the problem of racism. You see, there's really no problem of racism. If you just take the non-Jewish peoples alone, there's no problem. The problem with racism is making racism a problem. So the concept, the paradigm of the chosen people already introduces a terribly destructive malware. And then that malware replicates itself into all these other iterations, which are all deceitful, like the idea of white privilege, white supremacy. That's a deceitful concept. There is really no such thing as that. There's no such thing as black supremacy or Asian supremacy. These are all deceits that are iterations of that primary division. So when we eliminate that division, we're all together as people. It's a true rainbow coalition of the children of the Mother Goddess.